And we are at the top of the hour. We are ready to get going here. So with that, I will do a brief introduction. Let me cut the jams, and then we'll get going. All right, thanks. My name is Mike Carlo from PowerBI.tips. Work on a website, and this is one of our webinar series. So we just do a bunch of interesting webinars around helpful tools and people who develop these tools for you to use these inside your Power BI development workspace. So today we have with us Steve Campbell, and let me get Steve up here on the camera. Steve, welcome to the webinar. I appreciate you jumping in here for us. Give us a little brief introduction, and then I'll let you present your screen, and we'll get going.
Yeah, awesome. So thanks, Mike. I'm Steve Campbell. I actually blog with Mike on PowerBI.tips. Write a lot of articles for him over there. I'm a Power BI guy, been working in Power BI for several years now. Teach it, live it, breathe it, do all things. I like to kind of tear things apart, see how they break, and try and put them back together, which is kind of how this tool came from. So yeah, really excited to talk about it, maybe get some good practices and help people kind of get better practices and change some connections.
Steve and I have been kind of bantering back and forth about how all this integration between desktop and model and different model files work together and kind of in concert as you're doing development. So it's been really interesting for us to kind of keep collaborating. Steve and I have been doing a lot of work together back and forth about this and just trying to really refine the idea of how do we work with a data model, how do we work with a report, and I think this presentation you'll really like. Are you sharing your screen yet, Steve? Ah, perfect. It's coming up. Excellent. There we go. Do me a favor and just go ahead and hit the presentation mode and just bring it all the way out of the, if you don't mind. So we're not looking at your PowerPoint the whole time. Excellent. Yeah. All right, yeah. Take it away.
Here we go. So yeah, just a little plug here for myself. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, PowerBI Steve, same on Twitter. As I said, you know, I blog over at PowerBI.tips, so you don't have to remember that whole URL. Just head over to PowerBI.tips, and you'll definitely find my articles on there. So I love to connect and love to share all the interesting stuff as I learn, and show everyone what I'm doing. So let's talk about the tool, why I built it, and why I thought there was a need for it. And it really came out of this feature in Power BI called shared datasets. Now, for those who are unfamiliar, shared datasets is a feature you can have in the Power BI servers. And this allows you to build models and datasets, publish the model to the Power BI service. And this can be published independently, without a report attached to it. By doing this, all your hard work into all your Power Query, all your measures, you can actually share this model across your company. And then we like to have what we call thin report files. These are kind of reports that don't have any of the data model inside them, but they connect directly to a data model. So we'll go through an example afterwards if this is quite high level. It's quite hard to understand, but we'll definitely run through and show how this works. But essentially what it is, it allows you as developers, as a company, to maintain one source of the truth. You can have a singular model or several models across your company for different departments that contain the same information. The measures are written there, and you can share these models with other people in your company. And this allows report developers to connect directly to your model, develop their own reports without having to know Power Query, without having to know data modeling and how to build DAX measures. This can be pretty difficult for some business people who don't come from this side, who aren't as familiar with Power BI. So this has this really quick and repeatable report building. Really allows you to quickly share and to have data models across your organization.
Now, one thing I want to make a note here. This is really cool. I think this is a great way of illustrating what's going on here. I think and Steve, would you agree? Like if you look inside an organization, you're going to see a number of people who are report builders, and you're going to see a smaller subset of people who like to understand the data modeling. And so one of the core concepts here we're looking at is in an organization, for potentially every 1 or 2 data modelers, you may have 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 report builders who need to consume those data models. And so really what we're talking about here from a conceptual standpoint is really trying to leverage a phrase that Steve and I kind of jointly use interchangeably now is, act like the business and then think like IT. So we want to build reports quickly and get instant value from our data, but we want to continually to do this in a sustainable, long-term viable way. So that's thinking like IT for reuse and single data models for many different reports.
Yeah, definitely. And thinking like IT is really important in the fact that maybe we don't want to allow our business users to try and do something they may not know how to do.
Yeah.
So maybe they don't really understand Power Query, they don't understand DAX. So by controlling that model building, controlling the measures, you make sure that everyone has the right information. And that's kind of the hack that we need to put on when developing these models. We have to think like IT. We have to have this governance and security and make sure that we're not giving the business, false information.
Yeah.
So this really helps, this governance and get the right information, repeatable, and keep one source of the truth so everyone's using the same data.
That's a great point. Yep.
So really, and we'll demonstrate this next, but there's two ways that we can connect to a Power BI model. So we have the cloud deploy, and this is on PowerBI.com, the service. You deploy a model and you connect a report. We'll go through how this works, but this really means, we share it, this is how we share. Now, the other lesser known way is that we can actually do all this without having to even open the service or even be connected to the internet at all. We can directly connect one Power BI desktop instance to another Power BI desktop instance, which is really cool and really fun. So, that being said, let's go and see how this actually works. So I've actually made two workspaces. I have in my workspace here a model file. So if I click on my model file, we can see that I've said this report contains a model only and is intentionally left blank. Now, what I've done is that when I go to edit, I built my data model here. I've done all my Power Query and I've published this model to the service. Now, there's no really way to distinguish whether it's a model or a report file. Everything's just uploaded as a Power BI desktop file. So what I've done is I put a background and said, hey, this report contains a model only. It's intentionally left blank. So I know when I look at this, this is my model file. So essentially what I've done is I've done all the hard work in the Power Query. I've written my DAX, done my modeling, and I've just published it up. And you can see this is published with a data set and a report. Now I have another workspace. This is my model workspace. And this is called my report workspace. You can see here, this is a little different. This is what we like to call a thin report file. I've actually published this report with no data set connected to it. You can see here that I have a data set. This means this is the model or the metadata about it. My thin report file doesn't have a data set. So where does the data come from? If we look at this report, we can say, this is the one with the visuals. But if I go to edit, I can see that these are the same fields and tables that are in my model file. So what's happening is that this thin report file is connected directly to this file in the other workspace. So if I want to change my model, my measures, or anything like that, I can actually change my model file, and then this thin report file will update the values within it. The advantage of this, of course, is we can have multiple reports connected to the same model file. So instead of having to rebuild this model every single time to rewrite the DAX, we're doing a lot of copy and pasting for every report. We just publish the model once. We connect directly all our reports. So how does this work? Let's have a look. Luckily, Power BI have made it very, very easy to connect directly to a model file. Simply to do this, we can say, hey, I just want to get some data. And we have right here, Power BI dataset. Now you notice this is saying, create a live connection to datasets in the Power BI service. And that's what today is all about. We're doing live connections. Now, you're probably more familiar with the two standard ways of getting data, which is import or direct query. Live connection is that third, lesser known, kind of more hidden way to get data, which means we're not importing, we're not doing anything. This is a live connection. This is very similar to direct query, except we're just directly connected to another data set. Once I do that, it actually brings up all of my models and all my data sets that are published in the service. I wanted to connect to my model file, which is the model that I built earlier. Once I do connect, you'll notice a few things going on. Straight away, I have my model. This has all of my tables in from my model file that I built earlier. You'll notice, however, that we can't see the dataset view. So that data view where you can see the table, that's gone. That is a feature of live connection. You'll know you're live connected when you don't see it in the left, the data view. And also in the bottom right here, we say we are connected live to the Power BI dataset model file. Again, this has imported my model. I have two star schemas with two fact tables here, adjustments and sales. So me as a business person, I don't need to know how to build all this. I don't need to understand the modeling part. It's all there for me. In a couple of clicks, I've connected to someone else's model who's done all the hard work. And you know, I can start building up my graph straight away, just like I would with anything else. So that's the advantage of shared data sets. So there is one other way, as I said, which is called this local development. You know, this was connected live to the file in the Power BI service. So we're connected live to this model workspace, to this data set. I can also connect one Power BI file to another Power BI file. So what I've done is I have both my model file and my report file. I've downloaded them to my local desktop. I've put them in a report folder, a file called my dev local folder. So, you know, I know that this is my development on my local desktop, and I'm not editing anything in the cloud. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my model file. Now, instead of connecting a report directly to a report in the service, I want to connect a Power BI desktop file to this open report on my local instance. What happens when you open up a Power BI report, a Power BI desktop, is it runs an instance of analysis services. Analysis services is Microsoft's really powerful engine that allows you to do this really powerful DAX, all the powerful modeling here. So you'll notice that this is my original model file that I created. I can see the data set, and I can see it, you know, this is my model file here. Now I said, I want to connect a Power BI desktop file to this local instance. To do that, I'm going to open up a brand new Power BI desktop. Now I'm going to connect this Power BI desktop to the local file. Just like I did earlier when I connected to the one in the cloud, I want to do this all on my computer without having to connect to the cloud. So here I have an empty file. Now I'm going to use a tool to do this of DAX Studio. So over here, my external tools, if you've downloaded the latest version of DAX Studio, I can just open DAX Studio and connect it to this model file. If you haven't, and you have downloaded DAX Studio on your computer, you can just open DAX Studio, connect, and I can say, hey, I want to connect to the model file. Either way will work. Now there's a very important number here, and it says local host, and it gives you some random numbers. This is the magic connection string, which is what is my local file. So this model file, that's the analysis services instance. If this is going over your head a little bit, I wouldn't worry too much. It gets very technical. But all you have to know is that these words, localhost 50768, tell my computer, you know, where to look, and that this is this model file. And I knew that because I connected to the model file. I said connect, and it came up with this number. So back to my blank file, which I want to connect to my model file. I'm going to now connect to the other option, which is analysis services. we can say live connect to its analysis services database. Now, I said when we open Power BI, it runs analysis services in the background. So by trying to connect to analysis services, for the server, I just type in this value, localhost, and the number 50768. So by calling localhost, .50768. So I've just typed in this exact value, localhost 50768, into the server. I click OK, and it was asking me to select my model, so I can just open this. This is the database, another random value it gives you, and you can click on the model. Click OK. Now you can see, just like I connected to my data set in the cloud, I've now connected this file to my other file. So that's something pretty cool going on. I can put these side by side. Now I can prove that this is live connected by, I'm going to make a new measure in my adjustments table. I'm just going to call this live equals 1. I go back to this file, and I just say hit refresh, and you can see that my live now pulls up. This happens because this file on the right here is connected directly to this file on the left. This only happens and it only works while you keep this file on the left open. So if I close this file, I say I don't want to save it, I try and refresh. It's going to throw me an error here. Now it's going to think for a while, it's trying to look, but I've closed that file open, that analysis services, and it's saying, hey, you've closed it, where did it go? We're now not connected to anything. So that's one way to kind of connect from a cloud service deploy and a local service deploy. Now, I think that was pretty complicated to go through all those steps. And there is also one big issue once you've connected to your cloud display here. So I'm going to open my report file. This report file is connected to the shared data set in the cloud. If all that went over your head, that's fine, because that's what today's session is about. It's about making this whole process easier and how to do this in a couple of clicks. So here's my report file. This is the one that's published in the service. If we look in the bottom right, we can say connected to the live Power BI dataset model file in the model workspace. This means that this is connected to my published model in the PowerBI.com service. But hey, I want to disconnect this and connect it to something else. How do I do that? You can see all my options here are grayed out. The only thing I can do is go to data store settings and connect to a different report that's published on the workspace. That's my only option. Once you have a report file that's connected to a file in the cloud, to a model file, you can't disconnect it. So what does this mean? Let's look through this. We've gone through a lot here. So let's kind of see a summary, a demonstration. There was a lot to take in. It was very complicated. And if you didn't understand it, that's great, because that's what today's about. So what is the point of having, this PowerBI.com and this local machine? This is very complicated. The issue is that I have a PowerBI deployed model. I have a model only on the PowerBI.com connected to a data set. Up here, this top bit, this is the cloud. This is the service, PowerBI.com. Down here is my local machine. I'm happy because I've published my model and I've connected to a report. Now my manager says, hey, we want to make some edits to your model. Now this is all connected to the cloud. So what do I have to do in order to make these edits? I want to download them both and edit them. So here, I download my Power BI report, but it's still connected to my Power BI data model. There is no way to remove that live connection. So if I was making edits, I would have to republish the model every single time to see an instant edit. Now, obviously, I don't want to publish over my Power BI model, because this means that I'm publishing directly to the production environment. When I write DAX, I'm not sure. I need to make a few attempts at it. I often mess up. I say, hey, I'm going to delete this whole thing and start again. I can only do that if I'm doing it all on my local machine. I don't want to keep publishing it back to the service every single time. The other option is, you make development workspaces on the service. Now, all our report builders are making a lot of different workspaces. It gets out of hand. Really, I want to do this all on my local machine. The advantage of doing that is that then I can see when I'm ready and I think my changes are good, I can publish it back to the service. So solution, what we do, and this is what hot swap connections come in. Step one is we download the model as well. So now we have the model downloaded to our local machine, and we have the Power BI dataset, which is still connected to the service. We have them both both downloaded to a local machine. But the issue here, our Power BI report file, this one in the bottom right here, it's still connected to the cloud instance of my model. What I want to do is I want to connect it to my local one, so I can do all my editing on my local machine without having to republish the model every time to see updates, to check my DAX. So once we've downloaded the model, step two is run hot swap. And I'll replay the step again. This is what hot swap connections, the external tool, does. It takes this connection from the Power BI dataset to the Power BI model. It removes it and it connects it to your local machine. And then by that, now it changes it to what we call an analysis services connected report. This means that it changes from being a cloud connected dataset report to analysis services. Everything here is now contained on my local machine. I can make my edits and I can see them being updated in real time. I can see all my edits without having to republish, without having to overwrite anything in the service. So step three, I do some local editing, right? I'm testing DAX. Everything's on my machine. I don't even need the internet to test out how it works. I can mess it all up. I can delete the files and just start again if I want. Once I'm happy, I've written my DAX, it works, and my reports are updated, then I can run hot swap again. We have a tool called remove connections. This will strip out the connections and actually make it connected to nothing, which then I can go over to my report. I can republish my model, which I've made the edits to, and I'm happy with the edits. I'll then reconnect my data set because I've stripped out the connections, and I'll republish the report. So very theoretical that, again, much easier to see to the demo. So here we go. I've downloaded my model file and my report file. Really important, I put them in a dev local folder. This is not a production folder. This is a folder I can mess up. They're copies of my report. Always make copies. It's very easy to save over something, to get confused and overwrite or delete something that you're not meant to. It's a great idea to always make a dev local folder. So I've downloaded them, copied to this folder. Now the issue is, this report file, as I opened earlier, we can have a look at it. It's still connected to my model file in the service up in the cloud. That's not what I want. I want to basically change these connections to connect it to the model file on my local machine. So if I open my report file here, see this is my report file with the graphs in. In the bottom right, it says connected live to the Power BI dataset. I can't change these connections. I don't have that option. I can't see get data. I can only change it to another live connection. Not really useful if I want to do local editing. So step one, we download and open the model. We always start with the model. This isn't live connected because this is the one that contains all the metadata. This is now where I'm going to go to external tools. If you haven't downloaded my external tool yet, head over to PowerBI.tips website and use the Business Ops Installer. Mike will send the links in the chat as well. So we run the hot swap connections. We open up the hot swap connections, and it gives us a few options here. We have connect, remove, help, and settings. The one I want to do is connect because I want to connect another report to this file. Then I'm going to make my local edits. Then I'm going to remove those connections. So we'll demo that. We have two options. We have overwrite and connect, copy and connect. If we go to the help, we can see overwrite will modify the file directly. Copy will duplicate it first. This is in case, this will actually edit parts of your file. This will alter the file, the Power BI files. So just to be safe, I like to copy and connect so we can leave the original file intact and make a copy of it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click copy and connect. It's saying, which file do you want to connect to this file? So remember, we started with the model file. We're connecting something to this open Power BI. So I'm going to say, I want to connect my report file to this file. I'm going to click it, and it's going to open this. It's going to edit this file. What it's done is it's gone into the file itself. It's made some edits. Now you can see, because I said copy and connect, instead of editing the file directly, it's left this original one intact, and it's made a copy. It's copied here, and it's given it a suffix of report, and it's opened it up. Now, just like we had before, if we look in the very bottom right of the report file, we said live connection. What we've done is we've removed this connection to the file in the cloud, and we've connected it directly to the model file, all on our local machines. Again, I can show that by saying new live measure equals 1. And I've added this to my model file. I can go over and I can see click refresh. Now we can see this pop up in our report file. This means I can do local editing. When I'm writing DAX, I can instantly see the DAX in my report without having to republish this model every single time, without having to publish it to a new workspace, create all these new workspaces. I don't need to be connected to the internet for this. This is all happening on my local machine. This report file is directly connected to this model file. So now what? Let's say I've made some edits. I made some edits to my DAX measures, and I also made some edits to my graphs. I'm going to add this new measure into my report up here as a card, because I wanted to display the number 1 in the top right for some reason. So in order to do this now, I need to publish both this report file and the model file back to the cloud, because I'm happy, I'm done. I can see my DAX works because I can see it in the file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save my report, and I'm going to close it. Now, you can do this from any open Power BI. I'm going to say this, now that I've made these edits, however, this report file that I just made the edits to, it's still connected to this instance of the model file. I want to remove those connections and connect it back to a version in the cloud. So to do that, I'm going to first say, I'm going to save my model file. I'm happy with this model file. I want to publish this back to the cloud. So I'm going to publish my model file back up to the model workspace. This is with my new DAX in. I'm happy, it works. Now that it's published, I want to connect my report file back up to this one. What I can do is I can hot swap connections, and I can go remove connections. Now, remove connections just strips any live connections out of the file, and you can start and you can connect it to whatever you want. Now, this only works for live connections. We're always talking about live connections here. So instead of making another copy, I'm just going to overwrite and remove live connections. Again, overwrite will edit the file directly without making a copy first. So it's this one. This is the one that I made my edits to, report file underscore report. Again, what I did is I connected it directly to this model. I want to strip that connection out so I can reconnect it back to the cloud. So once I click that, it's then going to open this file. But before opening it, it's actually gone in and stripped out all the connections. Now, it looks a little scary when you first open up, but don't worry, this is what we want. Remember, I took out all the connections. So this report is a thin report. It's not connected to anything. There's no graphs on here because there's no data. You can see the fields. So that's fine, because what we want to do now is, luckily, it stores all the metadata and all the information, even though you can't see. It knows what fields were used, and it knows what's supposed to be in the graphs. It just can't find them because it's not connected. But we see now we're able to connect to whatever we want. So I'm going to go back to my Power BI datasets, and I'm going to connect it back to my model file in the service. So here I'm going to click the model file, and this is the one published on PowerBI.com. I'm going to create this connection. And you can see, just like magic, everything slowly comes back. We've now connected this back to this new model I just published. You can see here's my new measure in the bottom right, connected live to the Power BI dataset model file in model workspace. The model workspace being the service PowerBI.com. So we've now connected this back to the new model with our new DAX in that I just published earlier. So now I'm happy. So I can publish this report. I'll save it. And I will, obviously you can change the name back if you want, but I can, so I'm going to save this back over my original name because, I created a copy. I like to create copies. I'm very conscious about messing something up. Sometimes I like to start again. I am editing files directly here. This is not strictly supported by Microsoft, so always back up your files. I always like to make copies.
And I was going to make that point. The script itself is so this is kind of, it allows you to do it, but it's technically a not supported feature from Microsoft. You're actually modifying the file. So it's, in this case, especially when you're working with modifying direct files from a PBIX file, actually going in and editing them, it's best practice to try and take a copy of it, do your changes, make sure everything works fine, and then you're not corrupting the file. So, big caution here, use it at your own risk. It's definitely very helpful. Maybe hopefully in the future here, Microsoft will allow some more support and provide some more, robust features around allowing this being a supported feature at some point in the future.
Yep. Yeah. And when we say not supported by Microsoft, what we mean is, I don't work for Microsoft. I developed this by myself. Therefore, if anything goes wrong, Microsoft won't help you because it's not their product, right? It's mine. This is an open source tool. Use at your own risk. But always essentially just make a copy first, and you'll be fine. So I'm going to publish this back to my report workspace. Now this is reconnected back in the cloud, like we had originally. So let's go through that again, just to wrap up exactly what we've just done here. So we started off with a model file and a Power BI dataset connected report. This was in the cloud. This is how we started. I had everything connected. I've said, hey, someone had asked me, I've got a report. Can you add some more DAX measures into it? I want a 1 in the top right-hand corner, and I want that to be a measure. So I've said, okay. So I downloaded my Power BI dataset connected report. But again, I can't test my DAX without having the model downloaded as well and connected locally. Unless I want to publish up every time, potentially overwrite things, get confused, and just cause a lot of errors. So I downloaded a copy of my Power BI report model. Again, my dataset though my report is still connected to that shared dataset in the service. So I run hot swap. Then I opened the model, I ran my hot swap and connected my report file directly to the Power BI data model. And this made it an analysis services connected report. I then did local edits. I added a measure and it said 1. And then I also added a card to my report. Then I ran remove connections. This took away all the connections that I just made. So now this Power BI dataset is not really connected to anything right now. It's just a thin model with no connections. I then publish my model. I upgraded model with a new DAX back to the service because I'm happy I've tested. I then connected by going to get data Power BI datasets to my model in the cloud. And then, full circle, I've then published my Power BI dataset report back to the cloud. So that we're now back in the cloud, back to square one. I've managed to download these back, both local machine, edit them locally, be able to test and see everything locally. Then once I'm happy, I publish them back. So here, just a little wrap up for this hot swap connections. It's made for live connections only. So this is when you have these thin report files directly connected to other reports or analysis services, something like that. Again, not supported by Microsoft, right? Microsoft didn't make this. So it's a third-party tool. They haven't officially recognized it or supported it. Backup files. The best way to do this, just have a folder where you copy your files into a dev folder. What I normally do is I copy them to my dev folder. Before I publish, I save them to a separate folder called published. That way I'm never editing, my files directly. We always make a copy first. And you know what? This is great advice. Do this for everything, not even just hot swap connections. If you have a file that you are using in production that's on the service, have a folder on your local machine where you copy first, get into that routine. I'm not sure, but I've done this 100 times where I've gone and I've accidentally saved something over. When I've messed something up, I've deleted something, I've realized it's very annoying to try and undo your work. So just copy things over first, make your edits. If you really mess everything up, you can just delete it and start again. And also, SharePoint has version history.
Yeah, I would say this is a really good note here as well. And this is something I use very adamantly as I do things with this space as well, is it's the concept of when you're working with Power BI service and files, I typically never edit anything in the service. It's almost always a bad idea to edit things in the service. If you build a report in the service, it can only live in the service. You can't download it to your local machine to make edits or changes. So recommendation when you're doing Power BI development is go download Power BI Desktop, build all your files, whether they're model or report level files, and build everything that you can locally. And then store those things either on a local machine, and I think, Steve, you're just getting ready to get into it. SharePoint is another good place to keep the files, but you want to keep you want those to be the master files. You don't want to be going to the service, making changes there, and then trying to download those files. It just creates a bit of a bad practice, and that way, all the files that you have stored somewhere, either locally or in SharePoint, those become the end-all be-all solution. And then you can kind of version control those files if you need to with other systems as well.
Yeah, exactly. And when we talk about SharePoint, I'm talking about OneDrive too. You can sync a OneDrive folder to your local machine. So it works just like a normal folder. You can save that, have that everything in your local machine. If you do lose internet, you'll still store it there until you regain it and upload a copy. But again, it has a version history. You can roll back if you make mistakes. Really helpful. I always like to use OneDrive and SharePoint where possible. So yeah, great point, Mike. Again, really fits in with, act like the business, think like IT. These are all IT processes that we're trying to get. This theory of kind of branching off something, doing local development. So you're not editing something in the service. You're not editing something directly. I don't know about you, but I've done that before and I've messed up, and it's a horrible feeling. And you're spending until midnight trying to undo and hope no one notices and say, why is my report not working? So just protect yourself at this point.
So I actually got a question that comes in right now. A question for, I think you, Steve. So the question is, can I run the second half of the procedure to remove a connection to a cloud SSAS and to point it to maybe a data set that sits locally to that cloud? Let me get like a local SSAS model. So I guess the question here really is, can I just use this to strip the connection, regardless whether it's live or not live? Can I just take any old Power BI file and strip out the connection?
So yeah, great question. It specifically just does live connections, and that is for a purpose that, we don't want to, it would be very easy to destroy whole data models with the click of a button. So it only destroys those live connections, and all that live connection is just pointing somewhere. But if you are connected live to like an analysis services, then yes, this will strip out any live connections there. If it's a live connection connected directly, you don't have to go through this whole process. You can just use that remove connections bit, and it will strip out the live connections. Doesn't matter if you used a hot swap before or after. That is definitely one way. Yeah, you can do it from analysis services to data sets, any live connection.
And there's another question out here that I'm going to jump over to is the gentleman is asking, why not use Git to control the versioning? And I think I know the answer to this one. So Git is a good option. That does definitely work. However, there are limitations to the size of the files that you can use in Git. So if you're trying to version a thin report, Git would totally work. You can totally check in, check out files right there. That is a good alternative for a thin report. However, data models and data model reports, or just the PBIX file with just a report, can get enormously large. I mean, you can have multiple hundreds of megabyte files. I have a model that I'm working on right now that is 12 gigs in size when it's uncompressed. So these things can get substantially larger and so big that you can't even control them via Git. So when you get to these very large data models, you really can't use Git to manage them. You need other tools like ALM Toolkit or Tabular Editor, and then you're starting to use things like the XMLA endpoint in PowerBI.com, the service, to really edit and modify the connection strings or the connection pieces that go along with whatever report you need. So again, as you're moving yourself further up the spectrum into more of an enterprise governance piece, or you're building really big semantic models that need to be placed on top of in the service so that you can use them for multiple reports. When things get really large, Git will not work for you in that area. There are additional things that you can do with like Tabular Editor, where you can actually check in just the metadata. So Daniel, the developer of Tabular Editor, allows you to save the entire TOM object, the tabular object model, which they call it the TOM. You can break that thing into a bunch of little JSON files, and then you can then version and modify the Git of that individually. And that's another whole session in and of itself. But the principle there is you can version the metadata of the files, but you can't do the actual the tabular object model with data attached to it. So a PBIX file will outgrow the size of Git. Long answer, I know. And I guess as you get more technical in things, ask the question is like, it depends. So any thoughts?
And I think the point there, yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, definitely if you have a good version control and, you've got something working such as, the Tabular Editor model, I'm not saying don't use that. The point here being really any type of version control is better than none in my first. SharePoint is a great way. It's a great way, especially for business users or smaller companies who don't have this set up, who don't have the knowledge. Definitely not recommending it over others. I just say it's definitely the easiest, in my opinion, for business users. And again, if you're doing something on your local machine, any kind of files, it's great just to get in that habit.
Yes. And one other point here, Steve, do you still have the slide, the very first slide I think that you showed? I think there's actually a really interesting, would you mind sharing that first slide again one more time? One thing I want to point out here is, especially as I've spent a lot of years developing Power BI reports, there's two kinds of trends for measures that we have when we build reports. And so I want to talk about, I think you labeled it on the document, but you called it a global measure, and then there's a local measure or a local calculation. So here's how I'd like to think about this, and I'm going to share your screen again here, Steve. So hang on a second while I get your slide up here again. Let's see if I can get that and send it live. Okay, so I believe this is the slide, and this is a great illustration to this. If you look up here in the left-hand side, you have this thing called global measures. These are things that are commonly used across all reports. This would be something similar like sum of sales, sum of units sold. These are the common definitions that you just want kind of everyone to use. You may have some standard time calculations like year to date, week to date, month to date, or other things that you're going to do there, or maybe do some comparisons, this year versus last year, this year versus the same period last month. Whatever that looks like, you have the ability of creating those dynamic measures, and there's measures that are used across all reports. You want to keep those things generic. And then we look down at the report level. So we know as you get more into developing reports, there's definitely some styling options that you need to do or adhere to when you're building a report. Let's say I need to make a concatenated text phrase that says, I'm selecting this month and the total sales is, X number of millions of dollars or whatever that would be. That may be something that was only specific to this report. It's a measure that is local to that Power BI report. And the really neat thing about live connections here is you can build data models at the shared data set level that have a lot of these common elements. And then we have these local measures that can really handle the stylizing, the nuances, the very specific things that are very relative to the report. And so if you think about these measures in kind of two contexts, there's this global measure standpoint, and then there's like a local measure or a report measure. That really sets a very clear data model and actually cleans up your shared data set a lot. There's a lot of extra measures you may not need in there, and then you can leverage all those local measures in the report layer. And I think it makes it a lot easier to manage. And then with some clear designation of folders and how you're managing these global measures, you now have an easy way of being able to update a single global measure and have that reapplied to all reports beneath it. So again, if we found a mistake in something, or we know that sum of sales was incorrectly calculated for whatever reason, we needed to filter something out or do something specific, but we want to apply that same calculation to every single report wherever that measure is used, that's a great use case for having a global measure. I know we didn't talk on it too much. We might have to have Steve come back for another webinar talking about how to build global and local measures as well. But that's another kind of core concept that I think is very important as we start discussing, how do we, again, think like the business and act like IT? How do we scale these things out to very large models, but yet use them for many different reports and still get the value we need at the report level?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Mike, there as well. Definitely agree with you. This is a session in itself to talk about kind of shared data sets. Different techniques here, which we'll definitely have. We have one planned up to read some blogs about this. But, one thing as well, I just kind of want to introduce it here. I'm not suggesting from this slide, you don't also have to have one huge model. You can have several different shared data sets. And I think that's important. I like to kind of have, often HR will have a shared data set that they only share with people in HR because it has things like, social securities or private information. But then there might be a sales shared data set, which could be shared to more of the business because it's much more about sales and future trends, that kind of information, which can be shared a lot. So you can have different data sets and different models based on security. You can have them by job function. It really depends on your size of your business and governance. And there's different techniques for these, which we can go in, a session all on its own. I get excited talking about this stuff, but point being here, it's not just one huge model that everyone's connecting to. We can break them up, but again, make these models reusable. So everyone's using the same definition of sales,
which
I think it's big. Sounds simple, but this can cause
you'd be surprised when you look at all those Excel files and everything is so different across every single report. You're like, wow, I'm surprised how many people calculate sales or sales numbers different ways, and it's not surprising. It just happened.
Once you get into time intelligence and stuff like that, then it's
exactly even more difficult. So I have another question from someone else. They said, what are the current options to migrate a Power BI model to analysis services once the model has reached a size that exceeds the model size limitations without upgrading to premium? So this is where you want to go hire an MVP or someone who knows models very well. This is a very technical question. It's a great question. Yes, you can do this. It's not very easy. I believe Tabular Editor will help you out a lot immensely. So you're actually starting to merge into the area where you need to start using external tools, connect to a data model, script out that data model into something that you can then write that information into analysis services. Now, there's a lot of things around compatibility levels within analysis services and in Power BI. One of the trends that you're going to see, specifically talking to this question, is you're going to see a lot of people in general just doing how do I say this? You're going to see a lot of people when they're using analysis services models and migrating from a Power BI model to analysis services, there's a lot of differences in how the code is actually written. And so one of the differences here is Microsoft is investing a lot of infrastructure around making the PowerBI.com service incredibly easy and basically very business user friendly. So you're going to see a lot more in feature enhancements, I think, going into the PowerBI.com service, more so than you'll see in going to analysis services. So you're already seeing certain things like, I think it's calculation groups, and there's a couple other nuances between like large data set models. That's a large data set model is something where you can put the storage of your data model on premium storage versus having it on just regular spinning disks. So it's like a solid state drive versus like a spinning disk drive. So those slight differences are going to continually trickle out, and you're going to continually see Microsoft investing in the PowerBI.com version of analysis services. All this being said, everything that you're publishing from desktop into service, every data model is running on analysis services already. So you're already, you can think of a published data model to PowerBI.com is running on analysis services. So yes, there will be ways for you to transfer out of that. There are strategic decisions where you want to move directly into analysis services and away from doing a Power BI report published into service. You may not want to go to a P1 license right away. I would also recommend looking at some of the A SKUs, so you can actually get to premium at a much lower price point if you use some of the Azure SKUs for Power BI Premium. And if you're in an Azure development team, you can control what size of machine you want dynamically. So in the middle of the month, if you need to update or up the speed or horsepower of your machine with more compute or more memory, you can do that when you need to. So there's a lot of alternatives there. That's where I would say, engage a partner, engage an MVP expert in that area, and they'll help you navigate the nuances of how to do that and what's the best pricing options for you as a company. All right, and with that, I don't think I have any other final questions. Steve, you want to give us a kind of a wrap up, and we'll call it a day.
Yeah, so thanks so much for having me on here, Mike. So I really just wanted to get out my external tool here. This is all open source, so see me on the blog on PowerBI.tips. Go to my GitHub. You have any suggestions for improvements, see any bugs, please let me know. This is still very early, version 1.1 we're on, so love to hear your input on it. And if you just have general comments, something you don't like, something you do like, tell me my UI is not very good, yeah, just let me know, and that'll be great. So I'd love to hear your feedback on it, and I want to kind of help this out for the community.
Well, sounds good. Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it. Everyone have a great Friday, and we'll do another one of these soon. If you want, feel free to chat me in the Q&A area. If there's any new topics you'd like to hear about, anything else we want to go deeper on, we'll get Steve back and we'll do another deeper session if you so desire. Thank you, everyone. Have a great Friday, and we'll see you around next time.
Thank you.